it is, folks. The river of grass. What looks like prairie has, back in the day, it had 2 feet of water. I think that varies today and is not as much as it once was. But everything under that is water. And the native peoples that used to live here, there were some before the 1700s that disappeared around the time that the first explorers came over. So they kind of, went down with the smallpox blankets, I suppose. But very little is known about them, so we don't know about their life here. But then from there were the Seminoles, who were all the way up into North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, all that fun stuff. And they were driven down by the colonist. They were driven down all the way into here. And then once they hit this place, the Everglades, they kind of figured it out. And the colonists kept trying to chase them down. Like, get out of here. And they're like, no. The whole reason they liked them because the Seminoles were pretty cool. They were like, oh yeah, you want to do this treaty? We'll do this treaty. And then they would sign it and they would abide by it. And then the colonists would be like, never mind, we changed our minds. And the only conflict they had was the colonists stealing the Seminoles' cows and land. And the Seminoles were like, bruh, you can't do that. And then they would kind of retaliate, like, give me back my cow. And the colonists would be like, how dare you demand your cow back? Slaughter them all. Well, luckily they're still alive today, but not in their native habitat nor where they're from. Interesting fact, though, is, so they had canoes in here, and I'm reading this book by Willoughby, who late 1800s, like the 1890s, did a little trip down here, and he kind of wanted to explore some of this. It's really fun to read. He had a mad respect for the Seminole, which I appreciate. Not so much for the Apache, which I find entertaining, or the off-sided darkies, but I get that. It was at the times. That said, it's really interesting to hear kind of his trip and what he learned, and part of it is the boats that you use out here, so canoes for sure, but then you don't use paddles, you use poles to kind of push along, but even then you'll get into spots that are really soft and your pole can go fully in. But he mentions that you could totally get lost out here and not have any idea where you're going, but the natives did have their paths and their trails that they used, and they kind of would break a few landmarks. But what you see out here could be hammocks, so for sure that one in the distance, you can't see it's super hot, but it's got trees in it, and those are hammocks, and they tend to be slight high elevation, and they would have things like deer and other animals that the natives could have hunted. And then you'll see a lot of these other smaller dots, like this little thing here and here. So interestingly enough, those can be gator holes. So what gators will do during the summer months, when everything, well, not the summer months, during the winter months when everything's wet and great, they burrow, they do these burrow pits is what they're called, and they dig these holes, and what happens is those holes collect water and nutrients, and because of those nutrients you get stuff like these plants. But what happens is in the dry season, depending on the year, but even in general, a lot of this gets much drier, and so they might not have the water they need to survive, but they've made their little pool, if you will, and what this does is it gives them a place to live. Well, turtles and fish and other things will go there as well, and that provides a nice little ecosystem. It gives the alligator some fun stuff to eat, but he's got so many visitors that he can't eat them all, so some of the fish and everything still survive that way, part of like this nice ecological balance. Yeah, oh, you wanted to see some gators? Sure. There's gators over there. It's a pretty good sized one. So alligators are freshwater, which is what the Everglades are. Crocodiles are saltwater, and that's why you have to go down further to the coast, like near Flamingo. You can see kind of the two mixing a little bit. They're both pretty mild and timid. The book I'm reading was like, crocodiles are so much more aggressive, and I said that just recently to a park ranger. I was like, oh, are the crocodiles more aggressive? And she was like, no. She was like, not like their Australian or African counterparts where they can be larger and much more aggressive. Crocodiles here only get about 12 feet. So I thought it was interesting to kind of like, there's this pretty good book, but it is 120 plus years old. So to take it with a grain of salt. And to see where the things need updating. But yeah, so there's some of the gators. This whole place, so it said this is the crazy part, is they're like, this is the western edge. When you look on the map, it kind of looks like we're smack dab in the middle, and I kind of feel like we're smack dab in the middle. But technically, and I stuck on this other side just because of the sun. Makes this other one harder to see. But yeah, so this would be the rest of it. And if you continue on, you'll hit the Gulf of Mexico. And to the north of this is Big Cypress. It used to be swampy, I guess. It's still somewhat, but not like it once was. There's big water flows. We changed it even up into the 1980s. Corps of Engineers was damming water to control the flows, and then we kind of controlled it too much and was like, oh crap, we're having bad impacts in the south, what to do? And so now they're doing a more restoration. And one thing I thought was super interesting was on my ride up here, I was listening to the radio, and I guess there's a part, and you can kind of see it on the map, where there's like these lines as to like where it ends and begins, and you can see where humans are, and you can see like that bit of encroachment. So some humans bought land, Homo sapien sapien, they bought land, and it was technically in the swampy area. Well, I guess to date, the government has spent $1.8 million on just like trying to keep it dry for them to live on. And in the 50s or something, the government was like, can we just buy the land from you guys? And then like you hear this person on the radio like, no, my dad bought this land, this is good land, the government's just trying to get us off, so they flood us every now and then, we're not going. And I feel really bad because I get it. Like, they were like, they got it because it was cheap land. And so you bought cheap land because it wasn't great, but it's your land, it's your piece of America. You want to do everything you can off of it. And when the reality of the situation is just like, this is not how we interact with nature. If your belief in your land ownership and your right to the American dream is so strong that you refuse to acknowledge the role the environment plays in shaping all of this, then yeah, I could totally see distrust of the government, distrust of the experts. They're just trying to take your land and give it back to the park. But the flip side, like, the reason they got it so cheap, but was it cheap to them? I don't know. It's quite the conundrum. Like, clearly the conservationists were like, they should just get off, and the landowners were like, no. Do I think it's a big extreme to spend $1.8 million trying to protect land that goes against natural environment ecosystems that have been functioning for thousands of years? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this place has probably gone through a lot, but hundreds of years it's been this way, and I would presume it's going to be hundreds of years. There's only so much humans can do at a certain price to reclaim a land, and at what point in time is it worth it or not? What are your benefits in both directions? But I get it. Like, what are you going to do? Just like buy them off? And to buy land here is super expensive. So how is that person going to afford additional land? You know, it's about your way of life, and you can get a lot of great deals in other parts of the state, but it's where you're from.